Welcome to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons, the podcast where we cut through the noise and share strategies that actually drive customer-led growth. Each week, we bring you straight-talking conversations on adoption, retention, expansion, and everything in between. Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. Myself, Jason Noble in London, and as always, I'm joined by my partner in crime and fellow SaaS and customer success obsessive, Mr. Whitehead. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
Today, it's just the two of us doing this episode, and we're quite excited because we're going to dive into a topic that we've talked about a lot in previous episodes with guests and with ourselves, but it's also something that's coming up in a lot of conversations with SaaS leaders, and it's all about is what we call customer success today evolving and changing into something bigger, something more akin to customer growth. Now, whether that is growth for our customers or growth for us, seeing our customers grow, but there is this change. And I think for the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've been talking about this, and I think a lot of other leaders in the industry is how it's evolving and what are the changes. And it came, as we know, originally customer success was created to resolve and solve a very specific problem in SaaS. And companies realized that if customers didn't adopt the software and see value from it, they simply wouldn't renew. But it's changed. And so the market today and the challenge today isn't just about keeping your customers, it's about helping your customers grow with you. So today we're going to talk about this, where it's come from, why the traditional model's under pressure, and what it might look like if customer success does grow, does change into customer growth. So Jason, let me push this start back to you here. When you look at the origins of where customer success came from, whether it's created over the last 10, 20 years, or it's always been around, what was the problem that was originally there that it was designed to solve and help address?
Yeah, I love coming back to the start because I think so many people just forget about this and skip ahead and take the assumption that we need customer success. And if you recall, when a lot of SaaS vendors first came out, wasn't there. And originally, back when the days of on-prem, people would spend millions up front for software, and then they would just get a small annual service contract. And from the software vendor's point of view, hey, you've made your money. You're the bulk of your money. You're good. If they use it, they don't use it. What do you care? And then suddenly, the customer had all the user adoption risk and all the business outcome risk, and they had a sunk cost in that investment. So they bore all that risk of results. Where when the SaaS model comes along, it sounded so great at the time. We're going to lower our prices and we're going to keep them, and year after year, and we'll make it faster and easier to sell and scale. And it was wonderful. But the big unintended consequence was a lot of that adoption outcome risk got transferred back from the customer to the vendor. Because suddenly, hey, if we're not getting value, we're not renewing. You buy the gym membership in January. If you're not going in March, you're canceling that puppy kind of thing. And so suddenly, the SaaS vendors started to really panic and say, how do we protect this revenue? We have a lot of it at risk, and we have our growth at risk. We have our plans at risk. And suddenly it was all about us. And that's really, for me, was the big triggering piece. Was it started as a risk mitigation effort, and we need to do something. And it wasn't altruistic. Oh, we should just make our customers more successful because that's the right thing to do. No, bullshit. They want to protect their revenue. So I think that's a really key thing. And then they're like, well, we don't know what to do about this. So then everyone started jumping in with ideas. And I think it was sort of off to the races with whoever had something that sounded good on paper, let's go with that. But what's your take on that?
I think you've nailed it there, Jason. I think it is. It really was born out of risk management. If the customers didn't adopt the software and adopt it and get value from it, the risk that they would stay or wouldn't stay was on the vendor, because revenue ultimately depends on the renewals. And I think customer success became that mechanism to help protect retention. But as we said, I think the really interesting thing is today, the conversation has shifted, and retention alone isn't enough. And I think this is where we're seeing things really, really shifting. And it is, as we said, it's now about growth. How do we grow both from our own revenue point of view? What else can we do, whether it's new services that add more value, expanding those existing services, or helping our customers grow themselves? For me, that growth, that customer growth, is a two-way thing. It's growing the customers for their own benefits and clearly for us as well. But I think we're also seeing, the reason why we're looking at these changes is that and I'm going to say traditional customer success model is under a lot of pressure right now.
Right.
And I think
Absolutely.
particularly over the last few years, particularly in SaaS, we've seen budgets tightening, less available spend. We've seen more scrutiny from CFOs, more pressure on profitability. And I think the big question that a lot of people are asking now is, what is customer success actually responsible for? What are you seeing there? I
Right.
mean, how would you answer that question? Because it's a big one.
Well, I think there's a lot loaded in that question, and I actually would take a step back and look at more of the history and say, um, how did we get to where we are, as with the assumption that this is what CS is responsible for, and that CS is even the right place or the right tool, and it's one-stop shop. So I remember I was working on a client years and years ago when CS was still in its infancy, and they had signed up with Salesforce, and the Salesforce customer success manager reached out to the client and said, I'd love to set up a meeting. And it was the new CS manager there, had never done this before, and it was very early days there. And the client's like, I don't know what a customer success manager is, and I don't know what this meeting's supposed to be about. And the guy got on the phone, and he basically like, I don't really know what this meeting's supposed to be about either, but I want to know what it takes to make you successful and what that looks like. So he was winging it completely all the way through. And when I look at some of like the gain sites and the churn zeros and the CS vendors, they started to have a position of, well, you need to do QBRs, you need to know what they're doing, you need to know this, you need to know that. Well, it sounded good because no one was saying anything better and no one had any proof points. So sure, let's all get on the bandwagon. And then you get like the trainers of the world coming out and saying, this is how you do CS, and here's how you have an effective kickoff call and an effective QBR, all the while saying, that this is going to be this magic pill that's going to solve all of our customer issues. And we can wait until after the system's out there. We can wait till the system's, purchased and getting live to really address all those issues. I don't know if it's arrogance or blind faith or something else that makes people think that a couple of calls from a CS person is going to make all the difference. And instead, what are all the reasons that a customer can't get value on their own? Because again, when we look back to the root cause, if customers were good at getting value from technology on their own, they would do it, and there'd be no need for CS, and the vendors would suddenly have it. So what is that gap in the customer side? What is the reasons for that? And I think, for me, like you mentioned, you've got the product, is it aligned? Are releases done well? Is support okay? Is customer success? You've got so many players in here that can impact success for the customer and the customer themselves. What makes us think that a CS team alone can do it? And I think there's real flaws in that logic. And it makes sense of when we first came into this industry and the industry was growing up, that, yeah, sounds good, let's give it a try. And I think now if people look back and look at the companies that have cut out their CS teams and see no marginal impact on their revenue or retention, that's really telling that maybe some of this isn't delivering the value that it needs.
I think it's a really interesting comment you made there. Let's give this a try, because I think that if you go back 10 years or so, everyone was hearing about customer success and how important it was, and people were giving it a try, which is perhaps why we've seen such a divergence in what it is and people coming up with their own versions. There's never been a standard. We've always seen everyone understands sales, everyone understands support, but I think you've seen a lot of organizations left to their own and
Right.
very competent people, experienced people trying to figure it out. And it's great. There are some forums, the leadership groups, and the likes of communities that Gainsight, Churn Zero put together to help bring it together. But I think there still is that try. There's a lot of uncertainties around this. And I think a lot of the things you mentioned about QBRs, the idea of, going through all of these standard things and tasks we do, it's activities, or even, so it's an activity-based list that we're working through, or even just basic relationship management, which feels like rather than be something critical and essential for success and growth, it's almost like a nice to have, to your point, so that when organizations are under pressure to improve margins, these are the kind of functions and things that get questioned and cut. And when they don't see big shifts in profit, in margins, they're going to question, well, why did we do it in the first place? And I think this shift we're seeing now is this move away from thinking about customer success purely in terms of retention and adoption, and both of those terms now I'm hearing more and more people talk about retention and adoption still. But I think what we've got to start is this underlying theme around customer growth. But I think it also, that when we were doing the prep for this call, it brings up an interesting question, because what do we mean by customer growth? Could it be as confusing as customer success? So let me throw that one back to you. How do we unpack what customer growth is all about?
Yeah. And before I get to that, just you saying let's give it a try, that sort of reminds me, it's sort of the corporate version of let's fuck around and find out. And I think we did a lot of the effing around. So now we're finding out what's working out. And hey, you've got to experiment, which is fine, but still need to think about that. And when we were prepping for this call, I struggled with, when we talk about customer growth, are we talking internal view of we're going to grow our customers so we grow our own revenue as a SaaS vendor? Or are we actually talking about helping our customers achieve a level of success that they grow their business and hope that ours would come in? And I think ideally you want to say that you would help your customer grow their business, but to be honest, I think for most SaaS vendors, and as a business owner myself, if I could grow my revenues without having to do additional work or additional resources or effort with a customer, I absolutely would. So I think, if we're going to be really honest, customer success and customer growth has always been really about as a means to grow my software vendor, my software company. So I don't think it's as focused on the customer.
That's just made me think of something, that because when we look at sales, that for us as a business, our sales team is there to grow our book of business and our revenue. That's understood.
Right.
But for a customer, the sales team is somewhere they go to buy something. And similarly, if you look at support, customers know if I want support and help, I go to the support team. Now, you could argue if they want, so I as a customer, or if I want to be successful, I go to the customer success team. But I think that term success is fluffy. What does it mean? And an individual at a customer, we've talked about it before, an individual at a customer, success for them means something very different to success for their team, their organization. Maybe the term customer growth is just as fluffy, because I as a customer, I want to grow. I'll speak to the customer growth team. So maybe it's not quite there yet. Maybe it is that evolution, but I think we've got to still think about what it is we're trying to do, and is it clear for a customer? So to your point, for the customers, if the customers want to grow, we're there for them to do that as well. And it's how do we make sure the customers who ultimately are using the product the right way and are getting value from it. And I think the term goes a step further than customer success, and it focuses on helping customers expand their outcomes and impact. And I think naturally that does lead to expansion revenue for us.
Right. Which, there again, if it leads to revenue for us, that makes sense. But, I'm not under any illusion that customers or SaaS vendors are going to be just out of the goodness of my heart, let me try to grow my customer's business. It would be nice if they were, but that's the cynic in me. But also as I'm listening to you, and thoughts popped into mind. One, I live in Washington, D.C., so there's always like blowhard politicians on the local news on both parties. I don't get into that, but they're always talking about like a whole of government approach to whatever, story du jour. I don't think that we're taking a whole of company approach to making customers successful. And I think, we're really leaving it up to after the fact. Let's hope the CS team can do a little training, a little support, and pull this off. And for me, and shameless plug for myself right here, when I've been talking with folks for Success Chain, we have our Adopt Chain program really focused on how can SaaS vendors better help their customer throughout the entire life cycle adopt and get value. And what I would like to see more folks doing is right up front, if you take a whole of company approach, what are the steps and things that a sales team should be doing for the new sale to identify the customer's ability to drive value and get results on their own and be successful, not just with your software, with any software. And then what are the things that they need to be doing during those initial sales conversations to shift away from features and what you're looking for to let's really talk about what has to change and transform in your organization as a customer for you to get full value from this technology. And if you're the only one having that conversation, it's very powerful. You can educate your customers, you can guide them, and you can have a good answer about how we help you along that entire spectrum of value creation, as opposed to how to learn about our product. And so when we come back before to the root cause here, customers are not good at getting value from any technology on their own. And if they were, you would invest in CS. If they were, you wouldn't have to do CS because they would do it on their own. And so if you take the assumption that most customers are going to fail unless we help prepare them for driving technology adoption and value outcome of any software, instead of, oh, of course they'll do what needs to be done, of course it's in their interest. But if they don't know how, or if they have other things blocking them, that's going to be a real problem. So if you take the assumption that they are going to fail up front, how does that change every other decision point you would make across your customer journey map?
It's fascinating because that you've said it a few times in the conversation here that customers can't succeed in our product on their own. Does that fundamentally, and technology, does that fundamentally not say something about the technology that the broad we, as in the technology business and industry globally, are we building these the wrong way, or are we setting a vision and our customers are trying to catch up with us and we want to bring them there? Because should they not be successful, if the product does what it's meant to do, works the right way, is easy to use, is a seamless experience, and it does what the customers bought it to do, does that need a separate team to help? I don't know.
Yeah. So for me, I also, taking the big picture view, I look back when I was studying information systems, 30 years ago now, but it was all about the methodologies to build the technology and to implement and get the technology live. There was nothing in any of the classes or study about what happens in the, from the point of go live forward, other than how do you maintain the system. It was a very technical approach. There was nothing around how to make sure you're getting the outcomes that you need. How do you keep that going year after year? And so when I'm working with folks, it's like, if you look at as the system as the business transformation catalyst, but you view this is a transformation project. This is not an implementation project.
Yeah.
And if you say the transformation is going to take us 5 years, the technology goes live in year 1 or 6 months or whenever it goes live, what is all the other stuff that you need to do over the rest of that 5 years to get that transformation of outcomes, transformation of operating processes, making everything stick with the technology? The technology is not the end milestone. And I think so many IT projects, ones I've been on for years, the big thing is go live on time and on budget. And that's, if that's 6 months in of a 5-year transformation, the rest of it is just going to be, let's hope it works.
Can you imagine? It's an interesting, absolutely, it is. And a lot of these are, particularly with AI now, they're big transformative things that we're doing. But every vendor, every technology organization out there is now talking about transformation. The customers don't want to go through a transformation. We're quite happy. Yes, we could do things slightly better. Is transformation too big a step? And is the implication, if it's a 5-year transformation, there'll be another one after that and another one. Is there an implication that we're always, just by the very nature of what technology is, we're always on a transformation journey?
Well, that's I see.
It's fascinating because you can imagine as an organization, I just want to buy your software. I want it to work and do what it's meant to do. I'm not on a 5-year transformation. This is just what I want to do today.
Well, who doesn't want that? I want an Oompa Loompa now, Daddy. That's not the way it works. And I like your point, like, do they want to be on a 5-year transformation? Well, life is a transformation, and your life as an employee 5 years from now is going to be very different than what it is today. So the transformation's happening whether you like it or not. The question is, are you going to do it in a directed manner? For me. But
you've got to think about it differently, don't you? I mean, it's the right thing to position it, but is it a 5-year thing, or is it because a 5-year transformation, great, so I'm done after 5 years? No, there'll be another one then. It's an ongoing evolution. And I think AI is actually a really good example because we're still 3-4 years into using AI as Joe Public, but we're already beginning to see what it can do. But it's a journey we're on. But ultimately, and maybe this has always been the case, the technology is ahead of where us as users are right now, and maybe it always will be.
Oh, I think the technology can move so much faster, especially with the AI piece. But again, looking back at the context and the big picture piece, when you look at who most software vendors sell into, it's like if you're selling a CRM, you may sell into like the CRO or head of sales or head of marketing or support, or whatever it's going to be. The people that are making these decisions usually get in the roles that they have because they have great domain expertise in their field. They may be great at support, they may be great at success, sales or whatever, or marketing or whatever it's going to be. But what they probably lack is domain expertise in how to drive an organizational transformation or how to lead a technology implementation and then transformation. And so they have a huge knowledge and skill and experience gap there that they're doing their best, but they're applying a lens that they just don't have. And so if you identify that up front, you say, how do we take these really accomplished leaders, but they're accomplished in a different field, and layer into that expertise and methodologies and practices for driving a transformation that will ultimately help their cause more. What does that look like? And I think people are skipping that and going, right, let's just train on the platform. And that's going to be a mistake.
Right, but I think it also, from a customer point of view, it raises, instead of, like I say, yeah, I just want a CRM, this is what I want it for. Right. You're on a big transformation project, and it's quite a scary concept when you think this is actually a consultation piece of work. I need to be on a long journey to go through this. It may be the right thing to do, but that might not be where they are. And you've got to get the balance right there. And I think that's a challenge. And I don't think we're right today. I think we've got to shift. And there's probably a sweet spot somewhere along the lines where it is a transformation, but it's not something that's perceived as being scary. They understand why they're doing it, what it adds for them. And maybe it aligns with their own company vision where they're going.
Oh, absolutely. But I think by not educating the customer on this, it does make it harder for them to be prepared. And it's a tough conversation, and it's a tough sell, especially for like someone who's new to that role, that they're very accomplished and they work really hard, but you get an old seasoned person who's gone through 2 or 3 implementations and seen them all crash and burn. He or she's going to be like, oh yeah, that happened last time, we need to get ahead of that. You get a new person who's coming up in their career, their first time doing this, who may think you're full of shit. They might have some more issues. So it's definitely a challenge, but I think it's also one of these, like, if you don't help them, go through the hard parts and prepare. It's kind of like, if you've got someone who, is trying to quit drinking or something else like that, sometimes a just say no commercial isn't going to get the job done. Sometimes you have to do a more forceful intervention about where it needs to be to help them navigate through this tough time so they come out at a better result. And I think a lot of this, for me at least, is how do you help people break the addiction of their current ways of working so that they can come out on a better result as a result of this? Which is, again, a very, very different approach than
it is. And I think it also highlights this isn't just a name change, this evolution of customer success, what needs to change inside organizations. And I think you've highlighted absolutely the key things. This isn't just a job title. This is about changing how we in the customer success industry as a function, as it's been, how that operates, changing that. It's changing how customers think about technology, how customers across the board think about technology and why it's there and what this means for their organization. But you've also got to look at then metrics, how we today, a lot of organizations measure customer success, again, are activity levels, but you've got to think more about from a commercial point of view, how do we show, and even bigger when you're looking at a transformation that's not a 6-week implementation, this is a multi-year transformation program, and there might be multiple vendors, multiple technology organizations involved, but how do you demonstrate to someone the value of that transformation, the savings, the expansion from that, the growth, and also the depth? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, how could you measure success of a transformation?
I think those are some really good points. It would be really interesting to see if organizations, even during the sales process, but right on through, said, we are going to address this as helping you drive a 5-year transformation. Let's talk about you going live in month 3 or month 6. And then let's talk about how our relationship with you is going to evolve over the next 5 years, what you need to do, what we need to do, and how we're going to measure that. And I think some of that would be better identifying right up front, what are your business outcomes that you will do? And then what are all the activities and signs that show that you're on track to really achieve them over the next 5 years? And there'll be a lot of things. If you actually mapped out not just a customer journey with how you engage with them, but also what are all the things that need to happen inside that customer's organization that they need to take care of over 5 years to make this transformation complete, it'd be very interesting. And I think one of the things that you'd find is, shit, we don't have the right people here with the right experience to know how to drive a transformation. We know people who've learned technology or how to support technology. We can absolutely upskill these folks into it, but if they don't have, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, maybe time to put some more tools in your tool chest here so that you can go through and figure out what are the other elements we need to have, and then map those metrics and things to those, and what does that need to look like. and set the expectation with the customer right up front. Like we're gonna measure our results and your results and actions over a 5-year transformation. Let's figure out what this looks like. And in the early days, it is getting systems up and running and live and all that other good stuff. But then what's the longer term process? Is the customer putting in steps to change their job descriptions and how they reward their employees for their changing, transforming jobs? Are you changing how you're hiring and onboarding your new employees, and how you're onboarding them into the systems and processes that are evolving? Those are some of the long-term plays that no one's measuring or putting metrics around yet that the customer needs to be doing. They just assume the customer will do it or knows how to do it. So that the customer is always reactive and fledging along. So I think it'd be really interesting to map out a 5-year transformation for a customer, maybe do it with a customer, and sort of say, what does this look like? And map out just what has to happen in their organization. Don't think about what has to happen in your CS team, and then backfill after you've got that tight.
But I think there's two things, because I think you've also got to look at how does your team deliver this? Have we as an organization got the right skills? Because a multi-year transformation is very different to an implementation. And you've got to look at, if you're selling a 1-year contract, how do you position a multi-year transformation? So you've got to look at how do we improve how we work as an organization? How do we get that better alignment across sales, our customer team, whatever we call it, product, marketing, support? Because ultimately the whole team, right from our leaders down, needs to be that around this idea that these are transformations that we're going through. These are big transformational projects. And do we need a new team? Do we have people that are skilled enough internally, not just on the customer side, but skilled enough to work through this? And you're so on a customer side, am I not only am I up for this being a multi-year transformation project, but do I have the time? Do I have the budget? Because it's not going to be cheap.
Right.
Do I have the right resources? And what am I looking at? And maybe there's also an argument for multiple vendors working together on this and all playing their part. And maybe someone kind of program manages it. I don't know, but it raises some really big questions. But it's the right thing to do. I think customer success has got to a point where we need to look at what's next. How do we really look at delivering value for this?
And I think if more companies would sell and position like a 5-year transformation, and maybe it's not 5 years, maybe it's 7, maybe it's 10. I'm just pulling this out of my hat. That does a lot as well too in giving the customer, the executive who makes the buying decision, giving them a story that they can tell internally. Like at year 3, we're not seeing the value from. Well, of course not. We haven't finished the transformation yet, and it gives them a nice storyline to marshal the resources they need internally to do the things. And so, like if you're fighting over a 2-year renewal after 1 or 2 years, well, of course, we're on a 5-year trajectory. We don't expect to be there yet. It gives people, it grounds a different expectation.
It's interesting that though, because if you've sold it on a 2-year contract, you'd expect to see something. So how do you show that multi-stage value after 1 year? What should have happened after 2 years? Because I think you'd have a very different argument, more difficult conversation saying you're not going to see any value for 3 years. I need something shorter term. So how do I articulate value now, 6 months, 1 year down the line, and ultimately what's that longer term value that might be where the big transformation is, but there's a journey to be had along it.
There absolutely is, and I agree. I think you don't wait 3 years to show value. You want to say you're not going to get the full value in those 3 years. Let's talk about our value mapping of when you can get it. Kind of a. What was it? I've seen where people were talking about like when would the latest war du jour end? And it's like, well, we're not committed to a timeline. We're committed to milestones and to outcomes. And so being able to set these are the milestones you need to hit in terms of activities and outcomes and those sort of things, and not just based on a calendar date, would be very helpful for the storyline, because that gives you a lot of ways to communicate. Here's all the things that you're still not doing in your organization.
It also changes how we sell, doesn't it? Because we're not selling.
Absolutely.
We're not just selling a product. We're not even selling necessarily outcomes, but we're selling a transformation that's going to deliver a journey for you. Yeah. And that's a very different mindset from traditional sales.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Every sales demo I've ever been in with a software vendor, I always think it was a great bait and switch. They are showing you utopia where we're going to walk you through some use cases and pristine data that they have orchestrated and organized, that it's not showing any of the organizational friction of people having to switch what they used to do to what they're doing today, or the missing data, or all the crap, or this, this one department or this one employee who won't do what needs to be done. So they don't show you the chaos that exists in most organizations. They're showing you, look how great this is in a pristine, like almost like, one of those clean labs where people are like doing stuff and it's all in there. And that's not the reality of your organization. And so you're selling hope, and then you're sort of pulling the rug out from under them, unless you have a sophisticated buyer who's been burned before. Where I think if you do sell the transformation, it opens the door to talk to about all the stuff that needs to happen in the chaos and those sort of things that, if left unaddressed, will sink your results. Now, if you're just selling software, and you're looking for a short-term sale, that's a hard conversation to have, because why would you shoot yourself in the foot? If you're selling for long-term 5-year renewals and customer lifetime of 5 to 10 years, you need a long-term sales approach to match a long-term customer retention.
You do, and I think this goes back to earlier on. We're not selling. We've talked before about changing behaviors to how we sell. You're not selling just to land the deal and win the commission. You're selling for delivering long-term value for customers, and we should be compensated on that. And I think we've got to look at, maybe the real question isn't around whether customer success should be renamed, but around how and if organizations are ready to evolve both from what we're selling into something that is more transformational, and whether customers are willing to accept that. Because I think, as we said at the beginning, in the market today, simply keeping customers isn't enough, and we need to look at how we grow them. Great conversation. Let's the breakthrough challenge question that we'd love you as our listeners to have a think about. If your sales team today stopped selling to new customers tomorrow, what changes would you make so that your existing customers could help grow your business? And looking at this, how do you change this to a more transformational long-term conversation? But what are those changes that you could make today? Have a think. We'd love to hear your comments, but I think a really good conversation, Jace. And I think there's a lot more to pick up on this. And I think there's some things that we've both said that we think, hang on, let's get some guests in as well to have a chat to us about this.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks, everyone. Glad you're here.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. If you found today's episode useful, make sure you subscribe, check out our website at breakthroughsaasgrowth.com, and follow us on all the usual social media channels for more insights and updates. And don't forget to share this show with your colleagues who are driving growth in SaaS. See you next time.